Boker Tov, everybody. Please, you know what?
Boker Tov.
Being as we're small as we wake up, everybody just join us in the front over here. Maybe that's all right, because then it'll be a little easier. We're having a little conversation while the people come in. And so, actually, Rosemary, can you leave it open? Rosemary, leave it open so people know, just because it's confusing. That's all right. Thanks so much. And we'll let us begin. Okay.
Good morning, everyone.
Okay, so I hope everybody's mostly awake. We are very excited today to bring in the opportunity to have a conversation with Rabbi Menachem Penna. Rabbi Penna is not only just a legend in so many ways, also a role model of mine. So a number of years ago, when I was actually working for him, I was interviewed and I was asked who's the role model, and one of my role models is Rabbi Penna. Rabbi Penna has been the rabbi of the Young Israel of Lawrence-Cedarhurst for over 2 decades. But not only just was he an excellent rabbi in practice, but also he has now been involved in perhaps the most important jobs in training rabbis. So Rabbi Penna was the Dean of Reeds for many, many years, and I had the opportunity of working under him, with him, and see incredible growth and vision that he brought to Shul University, which is the biggest ordaining institution in the Orthodox world, is Reeds, and now serves as the Executive Vice President of the RCA, the Rabbinic Council of America, which now sees to the needs of over 1,000 rabbis across the world. And I had the distinct privilege of working with him for the last 2 years again.
And still
on another project.
And still.
In so many ways, and it's really been an incredible pleasure. So when we were trying to figure out today, as we're spending a little bit of time appreciating the Shul as an institution, there's very few people I can turn to better than a person who's been involved in not just Shul, but every single rabbi in this country, has gone across the country, seen so many Shuls. So we're going to start like that.
Great, terrific.
Rabbi Penna,
Thank you for having me. I honestly admit I thought this was a surprise party because I didn't understand how I never heard of such a thing. But it's beautiful. Thank you so much for coming out.
Sorry to disappoint you.
So early. No, it's okay. It's okay.
Present is in the mail.
I'd actually rather talk to Rabbi Trump than have if you know me, I'd rather have a conversation with Rabbi Trump than have a surprise party. So, Baruch Hashem. Good morning, everyone.
We're gonna have a lot of fun today. So. Just starting already at the background with Penna, you served in Lincoln Square Synagogue for some time. You were in Huddersfield, being the Dean of Reeds, and now we're working with over 1,000 rabbis in the RCA. Well, that's a lot. Question is, how did that? This is quite a career. How did you decide you wanted to be a rabbi in the first place, to get involved in the shul industry?
I think the main reason why I wanted to be a rabbi was my rabbi. I grew up in Fair Lawn, in the Shul of Rabbi Benjamin and Shevi Yudin, and many of you know them, they're legendary. And it's a little hard to describe what it's like to grow up in Fair Lawn in the shadow of the Yudins. But here are two people who were, and are, completely selflessly dedicated to the community. I don't know if outside of Fair Lawn you truly know the legends of the Yudins, but these are people that would have 50 people for Shabbos lunch. These are people that would have 7 or 8 people living in their house because they were down on their luck. Almost total strangers. Many know the Machlis family from Jerusalem. They were pretty much the same thing within New Jersey. And I really had the opportunity to see Rabbi Yudin change so many lives over the course of decades. One of the things that students sometimes come to me with is the sense that, adults don't change.
Right.
And I say, Baruch Hashem, I said, if you give a drasha and somebody walks out and says, I'm going to do exactly what the rabbi says, then there's something wrong with that person. That's not what adults do. I grew up doing NCSY things, and I saw that. I saw how you could change a kid's life at a kumzitz. But for adults, it doesn't work that way, and it shouldn't work that way. But I saw over the course of 20 years how families like my own had just been transformed. And at one point, they had a breakfast for all of the boys who went into the rabbinate from Fair Lawn. It was an insane number of us who went into the rabbinate, but it was almost sort of second nature. Like, you grew up idolizing this person. You grew up saying, if I want to go to Olam Haba, I just got to do what they're doing. I mean, it was so clear to us that this was a model. So it was something from a very, very early age that I thought I would do. The other funny story, I mentioned this recently on a podcast, was before my bar mitzvah, I had the chance to speak. I spoke Friday morning in the Shul in Fair Lawn, an empty shul, just to practice. I had never really given a public speech before. And my father sat in the back of the room, empty room. I gave my bar mitzvah drasha, and I concluded by saying, I could do this. This is it was like I found my career thing. Rabbi Yudin, very interestingly, he would have the boys, and he understood as time went on that this was challenging with creating parity with the girls. But he just felt it was so important. He offered to every bar mitzvah boy to give the Shabbos drasha on the Shabbos of his bar mitzvah, not to speak afterwards. Now, almost no one took him up on it, but all of us who did went into the rabbinate. I gave the Shabbos morning drasha that morning, and it was just something that was very powerful.
Incredible. You can also tell that now that you move sort of out of the synagogue, out of the shul itself, into the larger national institutions, what's something you miss the most about being in a shul itself? Like there's so many things that are complicated, but what are the
No, almost everything. I think, there was a point where Rabbi Twersky from YU came to me and said I should be careful about encouraging young fellas to go into the rabbinate because I enjoy it too much. I painted too pretty a picture of what it is. But I think there are two things I guess that I miss the most. The first is that people think of the rabbinate as this never-ending job, which it is. It's really a job without any limit of what you can do. Once you have about 100 congregants, never mind if you have, God knows what, 500. 500. We had, in my shul in Holliswood, about 120 families. At 120 families, you could theoretically never stop 24/7. It's what the Stipler used to say about children, that until the third child, you spend more hours parenting, and after the third child, you just divide your parenting hours more amongst the kids. He didn't say you should have a small family, but he said you got to be realistic. There's only so much time you can spend. A rabbi can be full-time night and day with 100 families. After that, he has to divide his attention between the people. So I think one way to look at the rabbinate is never-ending responsibility, but I always used to see it as really never-ending opportunity. If a person wants to do mitzvos, if a person wants to do chesed, if a person wants to see how the Shulchan Aruch, not just Hilchos Tefillah and Hilchos Yom Tov, but how every section of the Shulchan Aruch is a real thing and applies in real life. So the rabbinate gives you just endless opportunities to do that. I always tell the fellows in Smicha that the rabbi has the opportunity to be as nice as he wants, and nobody thinks it's weird. Right? When someone has the flu, if the next door neighbor calls to see how you're doing, okay, that's normal. If a stranger from the shul calls you, it's like, what did I do? What do you need from me? Did I forget to pay a bill? Did I do something? The rabbi, it's normal to call everyone in the shul. You want to get somebody flowers on Erev Shabbos? There are 10 people you could get flowers every Erev Shabbos. Here, there's 100 people you should get. It doesn't mean you have to recognize your limits. You can't walk into every Shabbos guilty because you didn't get to reach every single person. But at the same time, it's an endless opportunity if you're trying to improve yourself. If you're trying to just rack up mitzvot, if you're trying, as I used to grow up, thinking about the Yudins, if you're trying to go to Olam Haba, so here's an opportunity where every single day you could do an endless number of things to help other people. I'm trying to convince you to stay in the rabbit. The second thing that I really miss, and I have to say I miss this especially because I have, Baruch Hashem, so many opportunities to speak. I get to speak here, I get to speak in Woodmere, I get to speak all over the place. It's not the same when you teach people that you teach once in a while. When I teach in the 5 towns, it's not strangers. But it's very different when you teach people once in a while and you teach adults regularly. I think the thing I miss the most of the rabbinate is having a Shabbos afternoon Navi class where the same people learn together for 20 years. And I got such naches because they picked up, they learned how to learn Navi. They learned how to learn that. And it's just, I find that while it's nice to go around and be a scholar in residence and give the same speech in a bunch of different places, I'd much rather have to create new material and connect with my students. The students that learned, the students that I could refer back to the other things that I did. So that role as a teacher of adults in a constant sort of situation, I miss that terribly. I do hope to find a way, perhaps whenever we make Aliyah eventually, to start that again, to be able to teach, to be able to have a regular set opportunity to interact with the same people.
Incredible. Actually, full disclosure, when I was in Smicha, so we had on Fridays what's called SR, Supplementary Rabbinic. So you don't just learn lots of halacha, you don't just learn lots of Torah, there's lots of skills. Rabbi Penna was in charge of that program. So I remember, Rabbi Penna, when you mentioned this idea about endless opportunity many years ago on a Friday, that to me was one of the inspirational moments to say, this is worth it. And it really is a truth. We're going to take our time today to dig even deeper into the institution of a shul, because we spent a little bit of time the last few weeks looking at a basin and a school. But now we're we're looking at the communal institutions. I think most people think, we know shuls. We're in shuls. We got shuls. Mm-hmm. I'd like to argue that most people really have no idea what the full extent of what a shul does. So I'm a little bit biased because I've been on the inside, but I don't know. So I'm going to use Rabbi Penna's opportunity, because somebody who really knows shuls, to let's go a little bit under the surface of what's really happening. So first, to Rabbi Penna, just a little bit of background. When do shuls become like a thing? Meaning, where the shuls during the Beis Hamikdash, when we have this institution? Is this a modern thing? Only modern Orthodox people have shuls? When did we get here?
It's not exactly clear, but we know there are already the beginnings of shuls already in Bayis Rishon and already in the beginning of Bayis Sheni. People think of the shul as a replacement of the Beis Hamikdash, but really it was a supplement to the Beis Hamikdash, a place dedicated to tefillah. And they picked up very much during the Second Temple period. In fact, it seems from the Mishnayos there was a shul in the Beis Hamikdash, and they took the Torah from there, etc., etc. The shul the fact is that the Beis Hamikdash really is a place of tefillah. We tend to underestimate how much the Beis Hamikdash is a place of tefillah. Ki beisi, we said it last night, some at 10 o'clock, some this morning, some, God knows, in the middle of the night. Ki beisi, beis tefillah yikare. Beis Hamikdash is called the beis tefillah. But it's not a place where much tefillah actually happened. It was the portal through which all the tefillos came together and came to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But I think that when you speak of a shul, I think there really are three aspects. And I think that as we look at a shul, we have to think of those three aspects. Shul is a bunch of people praying together. It could be, especially after COVID, in somebody's backyard or somebody's house. Then there's the building, which has an aron, which is a proper place for tefillah. And then there's the rabbi. And you have these phenomenon where you have sometimes shuls without rabbis. My children just moved a few weeks ago to Efrat. Most of the shuls have no rabbis. They're proper shuls, but they don't have rabbis. And then, of course, we know of all these sort of backyard minyanim and this and that. So I think that the institution of the shul as we know it today is somewhat of an American phenomenon. I think the shul as a full service institution, the way it's come, is a fairly recent but incredibly important institution. But we could talk about that, with whatever questions you have about what a shul is and how it came
Well, yeah. So let's dig into that a little bit today. I heard somebody once say that diaspora communities need to learn a lot more about the nationhood, and Israel communities need to learn a lot more about Kehillah. It's interesting, the reverse. Can you talk about the Kehillah aspect of it? Today, what does the shul mean in the 21st century to a diaspora community?
Right. It's hard for Israelis to really understand this, and I think they would benefit. But for most of us who go to shuls, who've gone to shuls all of our life, So the shul is really the center of Jewish life. It's not just a place that the men come to daven, to make a minyan, to find other people to make a minyan. It's not just a place that is set aside to make a simcha in a simcha hall. It's really the center of Jewish life on many levels. Not only does it house so many of the activities of the community, but I think it also sets the agenda very much for the community. From the shul, from the rabbi, comes the chesed initiatives, comes the various opportunities. That idea of a full-service shul is somewhat of a recent phenomenon, but it's not that so many of those things were going on and then they moved to the shul, right? There's so many of those things. In many ways, the shul really allows for the community to flourish by bringing everything together under one roof, by bringing together under one leadership. And in that sense, I think it's a very important model. As I said, I can understand that, let's say in Israel, why they don't have shuls that function in the same way. There's so many Jews, there's so many things. It's not like we need to gather from amongst the non-Jews in the neighborhood and find our own place. There's so much Jewish know-how that there's a sense that we don't necessarily need a rabbi in order to carry out our daily activities. Maybe I'm learning anyway, maybe, and therefore I don't need to come to shul to have the rabbi be the teacher. But I think there's so much lost when the community is not centered around a rabbi that knows you, and a community of people that know you.
Well, yes, actually, on that topic, I've been speaking to educators recently, and what I've been hearing a lot is about this new phenomenon which is called like the shulless, rabbiness family.
Yes.
Like these are people going through the education system, and they just think, the guy will find, a place to daven in the neighborhood, and he'll find, a kiddush or a few to frequent, but like they've not found it, put down roots, they don't have a connection. The kids, the kids have no connection to anything,
Yeah.
and so the educators are talking about this as like a concern, because like let's say there's an issue of concern in terms of like trying to work with them, there's no one to turn to. So can you just speak to like what's lost in today's sort of a millennial drifting generation, that with having this shulless, shulless families
Right.
that float.
Right, and again, here I think it's on multiple levels. It's not necessarily having a rabbi, and it's not necessarily having a community. I think the idea of not having the community is that we all take for granted in a shul setting, and I think we assume outside of a shul setting that there's just going to be people there when I need them. And people are going to perform the various duties needed in order to I moved to a shul-less area of the Five Towns, right? I moved to northern Cedarhurst, which is basically is a Brooklyn zip code. And it's all shtibels. Now for me, who made my entire life about synagogues, this was a totally new reality for me. And I think there's something wonderful about the shtibel atmosphere. For me, it's a good 25 minutes to walk to anywhere that's a Young Israel type shul. So I love the davening there. But when tragedy strikes, or when there's something that needs to be organized, I remember the first time that someone that I knew well in the shtibel had a lost his father, and it was shocking to me that there sort of wasn't an organized way to put together the shiva home. I think that people who know a certain amount, who learned in yeshiva, there's sort of an assumption that they don't need a rabbi there to paskin. In the world of a shtibel, the rabbi doesn't tend to daven at the shiva home. In the world of a shtibel, the rabbi is part of the synagogue experience, the shtibel experience. And I don't say that in a bad way. That's exactly what the Rav is meant to be. He's meant to enhance the experience in that room, and he does. But when things were needed, I found that nobody had any of the answers to Hilchos Avelos. It was just, everyone was just kind of looking around. You have it. Look it over here. Whether that's an approach to halacha in general is one thing, but it was very unnerving to the Ovel, who wasn't sure if he was doing the right thing for his father, because sort of that sense of organized community isn't there. And again, I think you have that even in some of the most chesed-oriented places in Eretz Yisrael, where you know people are going to come out for you, but who's organizing it? And which rabbi is sort of the presence that allows people to feel that they're sort of doing the right thing. I always say to the fellows in Smicha and to rabbis that I talk to, that the rabbi being there, and you have a rabbi who is there, the rabbi being there is such an important thing. I find that when someone passes away, the advice I give to young rabbis is just go. When I was a rabbi for many, many years, I'd get a call at 2 o'clock in the morning, somebody passed away. I'd say, I'm getting in my car, and I'll call you back when I'm in the car. And I would jump out of bed, get dressed, and I would call them back when I'm in the car already. Because if anyone's had this experience, when the rabbi shows up, the temperature comes down, if it's a good rabbi. You feel that someone there now has got it. And the fact is, you feel a little bit, even though the rabbi's not God, and it's important for rabbis to remember that they're not, it's not always so easy, you feel that the Ribono Shel Olam is there. And that sense is really lost when it's your great friends and your great neighbors who are such balei chesed, who are all together. There's still something different. I think that's one. Number two, I think that even in the world today of great speakers, great podcasts, inspiring Magidei Shir, you don't need your local rabbi anymore to give you great Torah content. You just don't. It may be that your rabbi has great Torah content, but for most people today, you don't need your rabbi to give you great Torah content, and as great as he is, you could find somebody better to listen to than whatever your rabbi does. There's always going to be somebody online that's even better and has more insights and even is more interesting. It used to be that the role of the rabbi was to be the conduit for Torah for their congregation. That's still true on some level. More people will hear the Shabbos morning sermon, and certainly the Rosh Hashanah sermon, than will hear a particular podcast. But in terms of simply getting the Torah content, getting the insights, we can get that from good places on the internet, from good places and podcasts, et cetera, et cetera. But all of those things, all those suggestions, they rarely lead to practical changes in people's lives. They rarely lead. What leads people to change is someone at the right time that you trust to put their arm around your shoulder and say, I think you're ready for the next step. And that's how adults change. Kids change because they get an idea in their head. Oh, I'm going to do this. Kids, the reason is because kids live, and I say this, I start my drasha workshop for the rabbis. I tell them something very astounding, that people don't change because you make a drasha. Adults don't change because you give a good drasha. They don't. Thank God. It would be quite dizzying if 50 or 60 times a week you suddenly came out of the drasha and said, oh my God, I got to do this. That's not normal for adults. Adults have moments in their life when they're open for change. They don't live at a crossroad. Kids live at a crossroad every 2 years, every 1 year, every month. They're making a decision that could change their whole life. I grew up in Etziaswai. We could, in one kumzitz, in one havdalah, we could change a swath of kids' lives. Was that good? In certain ways. Did it always last? Sometimes. That's what it means to influence kids. Adults, it's very different. The Kutzker Rebbe said that the words of Torah, we know from Shema, the words of Torah should be put on your heart. Al levavecha. So why should they be put on your heart? What's the purpose of that? They should be put in your heart. So why are they on your heart? So the Kutzker Rebbe said that most people, adults, their hearts are closed most of the time. They're not making life decisions every 2 days. They're busy, they have lives, they have things. HaKadosh Baruch Hu understands that. But there are moments where our hearts open up. And at that moment, all of those things can now go into your heart. You got to put them al levavecha. When your heart opens up, you have that moment. What opens up the heart of an adult? Maybe Yom Kippur, but more likely a change. Something happens in life, a new opportunity, a tragedy, chas v'shalom, a simcha, something that gets an adult to say, I'm at a little bit of a turning point, right? Perhaps I need to do something else. The question is, at that moment, who am I looking to ask what's my next step? Who am I looking to as a role model to say, I think that this is a kind of a thing I want to take on? That's what I learned from Rabbi Yudin from all those years. Rabbi Yudin had that sweet little nudge when he was the rabbi. 50 years he was the rabbi. And he knew how to move people forward. He was not, and he isn't still, the best speaker. There are greater, much greater, more powerful speakers. But you need that combination. You need people who have ideas, but you also need that local person that's saying and says to you, whether it's in words or otherwise, it's the next step. To be honest, I think people are very, very lucky if they take a next step without some local role model who's helping moving them forward. There are people that do it, but consider yourself lucky. Consider it a quirk or something, a little handshake from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when you're able to move forward, but it didn't have to do with someone in your life. In your life is not a podcast. In your life is not a video, a 2-minute video that you watch. Somebody in your life that kind of moves you forward to the next step, that says you're dropping off, that notices if you're not there. The role of the rabbi is changing tremendously today. Because again, it used to be the thought leader, to be the Torah leader. It's less important for the rabbi to completely play that role now. But the rabbi needs to know as many people in the shul as humanly possible, and to be that person that can help them take all those great ideas that are sitting al levavecha, all those great things that are going on out there, and to figure out how to translate it to you and to me, to do that. I don't know how that happens without a shul rabbi, and that's scary, and I think that's what the educators are also worried about. It's not just the lack of shul, it's the lack of that person. And I know one thing that we tried to work on in YU, I don't think we figured this out, is that it's a very scary thing that when people get married, people get married young today, get married at 20, 22, 23, 24, somewhere in that age, and they go through a critical period of their lives. They're suddenly done with their yeshiva days, and they go through this very difficult change from being a ben yeshiva or a bat seminary, whatever, to family, mitzvah Hashem, kids, work, all this and that, and they do that without a rabbi. By the time they hit a community, because of what the house costs, they're in their mid-30s, they're in their young 30s. But who was with them for those critical years? By the time you hit 32, you're not the same person you were when you were 22, when you were in yeshiva. And it's scary to us that so much of that goes on, not without Torah, because you could listen to anybody. You could listen to Rabbi Stefanski, you could listen to Ephraim Goldberg, you could listen to anybody, you could get all these ideas, but that's not the same as having somebody in your life. You haven't quite cracked that yet.
So actually on that topic, that's one of the things I try, and again, my time is so limited, and I try as soon as the kids go to seminary and in Israel is to a frequent basis be in touch with them as they come back to sort of onboard them. And then, especially when kids are getting married, one of the things that I try to do is I have a list of all the kids who got married in the last few years, and I check in, especially ones I officiate. I'm officiating a wedding today, but I specifically keep in touch with all these young couples, because specifically as they're in flux and they haven't found their place, I'll reach out before Pesach. Do you need to do Michras Chametz? First year. They have no idea what they're doing. Usually it's dad or mom who's doing it for me. And so these small things like this, it's amazing. Actually, just recently I was approached by a large chesed organization, a well-known chesed organization. And they came and they said, we do so much chesed in a particular period of life for communities, and the Five Towns uses so much of our services, and they're obviously not paying, and we need you to give us money for this. So I said, with the greatest of respect, I don't want your chesed organization because our shul has a committee dedicated to this, and we're doing this for our own people because that's how shuls should operate. So we don't want to use your chesed, and we don't want to pay for the chesed we're not using. And it's not just because I don't want to pay money, it's because I want our people to do that.
That's right.
I want them to be moving shares. I want them to be, and you should speak to the shtibbles who don't have shuls, don't have rabbis, don't know what's going on.
That's right.
And you'll fill in to facilitate a limping along life.
That's right. I want to emphasize, it's not just the question of do we use the services or not, but we'd rather not use the services. Right? When a shul member goes to set up a shiva home, it is completely different than when Misaskim comes. Bless their souls. What tzaddikim? Who thought of this idea?
A cousin.
It's a cousin. Okay. What a tremendous chesed this is. But it's not the same as your own shul taking care of you. It doesn't have that hug. And of course it's needed, and it's tremendous. But when people in my shul would say, they said, we don't need to have shiva chairs. We don't need to buy new shiva chairs. We'll always get them from Misaskim. So I said, first of all, there are a lot of people that need Misaskim shiva chairs. But second of all, when it's the shul's shiva chair and someone from the shul comes and delivers it, it's a completely different thing. And it's hard if you're not in a shul miskeret to really even feel that and to understand that.
Yeah, and it's usually people, there's obviously a well-meaning neighbor who's making the calls and things like that, but it is something very,
Of course.
It's a sad thing. I was recently at a funeral, and it was a funeral of somebody who went to a shtibel. And I'm like, because I'm not the rabbi of the niftar, so I took a step backwards, and then I realized they actually did not know what was going on. They really had no idea. There was no captain on this ship, And then at a certain point, they put the body in the ground, and they hadn't figured out that they needed to do kriya yet, And I was like, okay, folks, please already step backwards. And the rabbi from the shtibel standing there, he has no idea either. So I was like, okay, folks, I'm sorry, I'm going to take over here. He jumps straight in just to make sure that the funeral runs. And I watch these weddings, and sometimes in these weddings I watch the couple from the Irish shul who's getting married. They haven't even met the Masada Kiddushin yet. This is this wedding. When I make weddings, I meet all the parents. We discuss it, we walk through every step, we talk about the meaning of every step. There's parents who walk under the chuppah, they have no idea what's going on. They're just being pushed around. And there's just so many missing
Right, chas v'shalom, none of this is an indictment of shtibel, rebbeim, and stuff like that. They are doing exceptionally well exactly what they're supposed to be doing. It's a different role. It's a different role. I never understood it before. I understand it now. But there's no expectation, there's no community expectation that they're going to be involved in every single aspect of everybody's life in that way. And it gives you a sense when Rabbi Trump says, what is a shul? So if you're reaching out to all of the kids between 22 and 32, the amount of work that could be alone, most of what a shul rabbi does is not seen by the congregation. My father, bless his soul, who was so proud of the fact that I went into the rabbinate, he was so close with Rabbi Yudin, he's so close with Rabbi Eisenman from Passaic, where he moved afterwards. He would say to me, what do you do? What do you do all day? Between Shacharis and Mincha, what do you do? And it was a reasonable question, because I think most people don't have a sense of the role that the rabbi plays. But the vast majority of what the rabbi does to take care of the congregation are not things that are seen by other people. I used to have in Queens, I don't know if it's as much of a Five Towns phenomenon, I had a whole separate congregation of poor people who lived in the neighborhood. Poor people who lived in the neighborhood, who were not members of my shul. But if I wasn't their rabbi, who was their rabbi? We had a shul that had a large number of Balei Tshuva, a tremendous number of Balei Tshuva, not mostly my influence. I was preceded by Rabbi Rafi Butler, who was at the OU, who was at NCSY. Who is the rabbi to all of these individuals' families that don't have rabbis? Their siblings, their parents. So the definition of congregation is a very, very wide one. What are those the rabbi's responsibilities? How to triage to go to remember something or not? That's decisions that the rabbi has to make. But there are a tremendous number of people to reach, a tremendous amount to do.
Let's go to finances for a second, so I remember being a young couple in a shul. It was actually in Chicago, and I remember the dinner committee comes in, and they're like, and I used to daven in one shul, and I remember paying the first membership. I'm like, at the time it was $600 in Chicago, or a family member. I'm like, there's a lot of money, like for our paltry salary at the time. And so we got over that hump. We started paying membership for the first time, and then I used to daven in another shul for Shachris. And I remember like the dinner committee comes in and says, everybody should be contributing to the dinner, and so I'm like, I'm just davening here. Like, well, why do I need to? Why can you just speak to like just there's so many people who float, why is it important to be involved in paying, even if it's perhaps not your central synagogue, it's not your place where you're.
Well, I think it's exactly that statement. I just daven here, right? You only have so much of an attachment. You only feel so much a part of the congregation when you just daven there. The original model of a shul was the Mishkan, and besides all the voluntary donations that are given, everybody had to give because it created a sense that this is our community. This is my group of people. And when you daven with a random group of people, you're probably completely yotzei in tefillah. Eschata ayani mazkir, I daven in the factory as needed. I work from home. I speak to rabbis all over the country. It doesn't pay to go into the office, just to have Zoom calls from the city. So I daven there, but it's a completely different feeling when I'm davening there. When I'm davening in my shul, that I pay membership, even in a shtibel, that I pay membership to be part of. That's my responsibility, that's my community. And the davening is completely different when you feel a responsibility for what's going on there, rather than sort of floating in. The Maharal says that based on the Gemara says that a person is supposed to step 2 doors into the shul. 2 doors into the shul. There are many different interpretations of what exactly that is. We'll leave out the Maharal for now. But I think the simple interpretation is that you have to really embed yourself in the shul. You shouldn't be that guy in the back who's just sort of at the door. When you come to shul, you come all the way in. You come all the way in, you feel that it's part of it. You feel that it's your community. You feel that this is a place that I take responsibility for. That is the model that we had already for the Mishkan. It's our shul. It's our shul. HaKadosh Baruch Hu dwells within us. Who's the us? Who's the us? So on one hand, yeah, any 10 people that get together, any 10 men that get together, be fair, any 10 men that get suddenly a minyan, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence joins. But I think we all know we feel different when we're in our shul than when we're in a shul. And it becomes our shul because we take responsibility for it, because we pay something. Exactly how you do it, membership, Rosh Hashanah seats, exactly how you structure it and what word you call it, but that there should be a non-voluntary, there should be too tired. There should be some sort of dues. There should be something that says, I'm in. I'm in. This is my place. And you can have more than one place, but that's because you pay here and you pay there, and it's part of it. I think everyone can, if you think of it that way, I think that's what it is.
It took me a while to figure out. I think that kids in this generation are trying to figure out. But let's talk to the regular person. So regular people who are like, they get it. They get that they need to pay shul dues and so on. So like I think sometimes people are like, well, wait a second, like I'm paying the dues. It's like why is like all these things? Like I have to sponsor the yard site, and then there's the dinner, and there's Kol Nidre, and then there's Rosh Hashanah. So like doesn't the shul like have enough money? Like what like.
There's two questions. One is how to get the most money out of the Balabatim, but I think in Lincoln Square for a while when I was there, we had sort of a combined amount. And you could then take that and give this to this, but you basically had to come up with this sum of money in order to. There's 2 issues. First of all, shuls are as institutions, I don't think they're wasteful because they're fairly small as far as staff. It's easy to get rid of a certain amount of the waste. When you have a very large institution the small amounts of waste can really add up. But shuls tend to be, for the most part, pretty efficient places. But they are expensive to run. Everything today costs a lot of money. There's no way that membership, I think I saw recently, it's about 30% of the shul's budget comes from membership. So there's going to be, but again, that's what the Mishkan had. The Mishkan had one responsibility, one thing that was obligatory, that everyone had to give a certain amount that's obligatory to feel like they're a part. But then after that, you have to realize that people are driven to give in different ways, and people have different amounts. But shuls aren't making money. Shuls aren't making money. It's a constant struggle for shuls to be able to do what they want to do. For shuls to take care of buildings. A building like this is very, very, think Rabosai, of what we pay to keep up our homes, and how much goes wrong in our homes, which are about the size of this room. And then you take a place that's 10 times the size of this room, what it's going to cost to do that. One of the problems is that shuls are not sexy. You have to excuse me. It's just not. The things that often are the most important to our community don't pull the heartstrings in the same way. I've done a lot of fundraising in my time. I've done fundraising for YU. I do fundraising for the RCA. But I've also been involved in other causes. My wife runs an organization for LGBTQ parents. We've been very involved in Camp Hask all of our lives. And taking Camp Hask as an example, it's much easier to raise money for Camp Hask than it is for the Smicha program at YU or for the RCA. It just is. It's one of those things, you come for a day and you just feel it. But ultimately, which one is more important? It's probably the institutions that hold up the whole community. So it's hard. It's hard. I always envy the fundraisers for the causes that really touch the heart. And those are important too, and we should give to them too. So shuls have it's rarely you rarely get this rush. You're not brought to tears, as you should be. You're not brought to tears, by giving, a pledge to give to the shul. But essentially, we're giving to ourselves. We're giving to our family. We're giving to, people that are fortunate. I see this around the country. People that are fortunate to have the right rabbi and the right shul live a much better Jewish life. They just do. It goes back to what we said about the shul sort of being the center of Jewish life. If you have the right shul and the right rabbi, your Jewish life is infinitely better than if you don't have a shul that's really an inspiring place and you don't have a rabbi that you can connect with. It makes a huge, huge difference. So it is something that, for the sake of all of us, I believe we should be investing in, and investing in taking care of the rabbis.
Yeah, it is. You're right. You're right. In our shul, the membership is less than a third, which means that somehow 2/3 have to somehow keep. We lost a AC unit recently, just one of those 20 years, and that cost $50,000. Just one of the
right.
six.
When we lose an AC,
so it's
B'didi Havi this week, it could be $5,000 or $10,000. When the shul air conditioner goes, it's an enormous fund.
Right, these things just happen. I want to just talk about that. Let's say people who are interested in shul, and I just noticed something. It goes on here all the time, which is the notion of breakaways. And you'll have an institution which is going well and it's thriving and so on, and then you have a new tier of young folks. And they're like, listen, I'm not running it, it's not really my thing, it's other people doing it, and they decide to break away. And then they start off like a minion in the basement or whatever it is, and then they move out and then they get their own building fund and they start. And 5 years later, the next tier comes into that group and says, look, we're not really involved, and then we just keep breaking away. So on the one hand, what it does is providing leadership for people who weren't yet feeling connected, which is a magnificent thing. On the other hand, what would you say is, and this is happening, these are all people who are making shuls, it's just we're making so many shuls. What would you say we lose out? Is this a beneficial thing to have multiple smaller places, or what's your take on this?
I think it's, as you're saying, I think it's a plus and a minus. I'm a very big believer in shul rabbis, and I think that the minyanim that don't have the rabbis are really, really ultimately missing out on something. We don't want to have somebody, most of us don't want to have somebody to help it tell us what to do, but we know it's best for us to have somebody who's going to kind of push us in the right direction. If you're talking about, breakaways that really are going to be shuls, so I think it's a mixed bag. This personalization, I call it shtiebelization, but it doesn't have to do with shtiebels. This personalization of Judaism, I think, goes a little bit too far. The sense that I need to have a minyan that is exactly what I'm looking for and is exactly the style. There's something about coming to shul because that's what God wants me to do, even though it's not exactly my flavor. Judaism was not, we're supposed to personalize our Judaism, we're supposed to find our own path, but not to the extent that we're not willing to be part of something that's not exactly the way that we want it to be. So I think there is something about this over-personalization that I need to have exactly with my 10 people. Part of it also is, I think that one of the beauties of a shul, I think, is the ability to come in contact with other kinds of people, with people that you don't necessarily always like so much, with people who aren't exactly like you, with people who are maybe a little more down on their luck. This idea of 10 friends or 20 friends sort of just making a minyan by themselves, even if they then hire a rabbi, I think it loses one of the main things that the shul is supposed to do, which is to create a sense of community. Obviously, Baruch Hashem, the 5 towns, Teaneck, their places are exploding. We need to be creating, new shuls. But I think that the drive for new shuls should be driven more by the space needs and less by the need for something exactly what, I want to do. I think that I'm a big fan of multiple minyanim in a shul. I see the beauty of so many people being packed into a main shul, but I think that the benefits outweigh the disadvantages of within a shul of having minyanim that somewhat cater to different kinds of things within limits. It can't be every 10 people. Because I do think that still holds on to a certain amount of community, there's still interaction, there's still, but sort of breaking off at will because we're looking for something else. Listen, on the other hand, it's often the 15 people who talk the most in the shul who now make their own minyan and suddenly they don't talk and you're like, what happened to you? There's a feeling of responsibility that you have when you're the 15 people and you're trying to make your minyan. So in certain cases, you say a Baruch Sheptarani. Now not only are they not speaking during davening, they're not talking during our davening. So there's something to be said there. But I think the trend has probably gone a little bit too far.
That's just fascinating. I love the idea of sort of breaking off almost internally rather than externally. Time is drawing to an end. And Rabbi Ben actually just has come back from having led Slichos last night at 3 a.m. in Yeshiva, and he's going to a bris in just a few minutes, so we appreciate that Rabbi Ben has, having left the rabbinate, Rabbi Ben has not really left the rabbinate. But just last question is about the role of volunteers. And for me it's fascinating that you don't have so many organizations like this, where you have a very small professional staff, and you have an incredible amount of volunteers, and the volunteers are incredible because they get their friends to do things in ways that no one else can really do it. On the other hand, they kind of float in and float out depending on what's going on. Life is busy and they're doing it at will. What have you seen in terms of what's the best model of relationship between the paid staff, those who are the professional staff, and the volunteers? What's the best cohesion model that you've seen?
Well, first of all, I'm excited to hear you get volunteers. Finding volunteers in shuls today is becoming increasingly difficult. Finding people to serve as presidents, as vice presidents, as board is becoming very, very, very difficult. Especially the younger generation, and I'm already old enough to say the younger generation, are very, very focused on their families, in a way that perhaps we weren't completely that way. I think that we had a little more of a community focus, and there's positives of both, or negatives of both, of being more family versus community oriented. And it's very difficult to find volunteers. But I think it's the same thing we have in the RCA. I'm sort of the rabbi of the RCA, and my balabatim are 1,000 rabbis, who are 1,000 sort of congregants. And they make up, including your rabbi, who's very involved, some of the most talented and creative people in the country. So like when I need to find volunteers, the people that I get to choose from who are going to be involved in RCA projects, it's unbelievable, the brain trust that we can put together of volunteers. But the problem is they have day jobs. So when the RCA rabbis volunteer for the RCA to put together a resource database, to put together a free program of mental health for rabbis, so they're doing it much better in a way than I ever could. And I'm getting the combined wisdom and passion of all of these people together. But then, basically, pretty much starting yesterday, I'm assuming that my group is going to disappear now until the end of October. That's it. I mean, let's be reasonable. They're going to disappear to the end of October. And, over the years, there have been different people who ran the RCA. And there were some who basically, out of modesty and out of putting themselves down, they sort of took an approach to the RCA to say, listen, the rabbis, the congregation is the RCA, and I'm there to serve them. I'm there to run the RCA for them. And whatever they need, I'm going to do that. And that's a very modest approach. And it's a very special approach to give kavod to the rabbis who are the laity, so to speak, of the RCA. But it also means the RCA only runs for a couple of months a year. Rabbis have basically 4 months a year where they're human beings. November through Purim. That's it. That's it. Once you get to Purim, it's like chutes and ladders. You go to Pesach, you go to the Yomim, and then you have maybe 2 weeks, thank God for Svirot, that you have 2 weeks of whatever that you could think, and then all the weddings and the graduations and everything like that, and then it's the summer, and then you have maybe a week or two before the Yom Norai. So if the RCA ran by the volunteers, so it would be wonderful, but it would only run for a couple of months a year. I think it's the same thing in a shul. You need volunteers, and volunteers bring energy, and they're infectious, and they bring their friends and all this and that. But you need people who are getting up. There's always got to be somebody who gets up every morning and says, this community is what I'm thinking about from the moment I get up until the moment I go to sleep. Because when it's not a convenient time, there's still somebody who needs you. There's still a shul that needs to run and needs to move forward. So I think it's sort of that. There has to be a solid staff that's there 24/7. I hate to say it, but that's their job, to be there 24/7, and then to welcome as much volunteerism as possible, but with the understanding that volunteers, they're just going to come and go. It's not what they do for a living.
Incredible. What a unique institution, really. Penna, I know time is late. I wanted to say thank you for making the time
Pleasure.
to join us.
I'm just glad I stayed awake for the whole thing.
I've described that my theory about staying awake at very difficult times is just speak the whole time.
Speak the whole time.
And then everything goes all right.
Speak the whole time, the coffee. My wife said to me about 3:30 yesterday when we got back, we were going to sleep from While You Sleep. I says, how? You're davening when? So I caught a 7. I don't know how much longer I'll be awake, but we'll see.
We so appreciate it.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Always great to see
Thank
you.
you
Have a
for
great
coming.
day.